From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Let's head out to the hotline and bring on a very good friend of the program, Cody Roark, with Locked On Broncos, as well as Pro Football Network. It is great to have you on. Really, really good podcast last couple of days. It's always a great podcast for you, but last couple of days I really enjoyed it. Your conversation with Malik Reed today and the conversation with Ian Rappaport yesterday. One of the things that he said that really rang for me in his conversation is that the Broncos won't be in for a quarterback unless it's remarkably, that's the word he used, remarkably better than what the Broncos currently have, and, of course, they become available. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it was kind of on tune with what we've been hearing so far this offseason. Denver, unless there's an absolutely more achievable option, an upgraded quarterback, Denver's not going to sell the farm necessarily to go out and get a guy when they can bring a guy in training camp, have him compete with Drew, and see where the cards fall where they may, especially in George Paton's first year, where essentially, look, he's going to have a hands-on approach. He's going to start building the foundation, but he's renovating. He's renovating the house that John Elway has built right now. And look, you can renovate without tearing the whole thing down, which I think is a great tactic for Payton. And obviously with his experience as, being Rick Spielman's right-hand man, I think that he's going to make the best decision for the organization, not to go out there and just to get a guy just for the sake of getting a guy when, the reality is his motto has been, we want to build and develop our young players. And look, if you try to sell the farm for, one of these quarterbacks, unless it's absolutely the next best option for you, you're kind of going against that grain there.
Also, he told you, Cody, and I thought this was appropriate, and we think it gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. He says there's a lot of different ways to build your team.
For me, I look, if you have a really good defense, if you have a good coverage linebacker, you have a great cornerback, a pretty good cornerback on the outside. I think Bryce Callahan's phenomenal inside the nickel. And then you have the safety duo that you had that were Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. Denver defensively, in my opinion, they're not far off from being a top 5 defensive unit. I think that absolutely it's attainable for them. In terms of the offensive side, you factor in all the young personnel that they have, the promising, talented personnel, and just imagine when Howard Okuwebunam gets healthy, you could go a 2 tight end set with he and Noah Fant, with Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Katie Hammer. I mean, the options are endless. You just have to have better decision-making, I think, from the quarterback position. You can't have these ebbs and flows where, you're good one week and all of a sudden the next week you take, a couple steps backwards. And that's kind of what we saw with Drew Lock and the Broncos this year. Drew would take some steps forward. He'd have a game, a couple of errors in a game that would set them back. And I really do believe if Denver had a little bit more consistent decision-making at QB, I felt like they could have won that game against Kansas City. If Drew doesn't throw that interception on that promising first drive, I really think it's a different game for Denver. So I think Denver defensively is not too far off. Can you find that element at quarterback, whoever it may be, whether it's Drew Lock, whether it clicks for him this year, or if you get a free agency guy that pushes him, if he wins the job, then you have to be better there, plain and simple. And bringing in a star guy, it's going to help in a sense, but if you have to give up all that young talent, I mean, you're taking one step forward and you're taking 2 steps backward at the same exact time.
What about the dumbing down of the offense in the back half of the season? Like the way I guess I viewed that at the time and even right now before the report, I just viewed that as your offensive coordinator tailoring his offense to his quarterback, trying to put his offense in the best chance to succeed. Yeah, sure, maybe you're paring some things down, but isn't that kind of the job of the offensive coordinator, to pare things down to what the quarterback and the team function more efficiently in?
Absolutely. And I think what we saw, too, from a beginning part of the season, we saw a lot of Pat Shurmur's offense. And to be honest with you, it didn't really tailor-made to the strengths of Drew Lock. Now, I think for a guy like Brett Rippon, probably the Pat Shurmur offense worked pretty well because, he's great at identifying where the blitz is coming from. He understands where to get the ball out quickly. For Drew, I feel like sometimes it was paralysis by analysis, and I think that's just the equates of learning a new offensive scheme. But here's the deal, too. I think we saw Pat Shurmur adjust his approach mid-season. And really, I think it started with the Miami Dolphins game. I mean, coming into that matchup, I think a lot of people were skeptical as to, I don't know if Denver's going to have a chance in this game. But then after that first series, Drew Lock throws that, interception to Xavier Howard. He shakes it off, and then all of a sudden we see a different Broncos offense. And we saw that for a couple weeks, obviously, until the whole New Orleans Saints debacle happened there. But the Broncos improved, and Drew improved down the stretch. You want to take away a couple decisions here and there against, that interception you throw against the Chargers on that one series, the promising series you have there, the interception on the first drive against the Chiefs. outside of that, Drew played pretty well down the stretch. And I think that everyone's so caught up in this divide as to, is he the guy, is he not the guy? Nobody knows the answer yet. But I think that at the end of the day, you have to bring in a competition. I think that George Payton, you mentioned he's not reckless. He's going to give Drew Lock a chance to show that he's not just going to discard him right away, because that wouldn't make any sense, and I think it goes against his philosophy. So you're going to test it out this year to see if he can pick up, if he can improve and develop, and if not, it makes your decision as an organization so much easier next year.
Based on what you've seen on film this year, did you ever get that idea that he wasn't very smart or couldn't run an NFL offense?
No, I never got that idea. I think it's crazy the wordings that people will take and they'll run with it, twist it, to kind of fit maybe their narrative. And what we're seeing right now in Broncos country, I mean, you have a divide as to, the Drew Lock supporters and the people that are against Drew Lock. And the good things he does, everyone amplifies that. The bad things he does, everyone puts that under the microscope. I never got the vibe once when watching Drew. I feel like sometimes he overthought, tried to do a little too much at times. But we started to see him calm down a little bit. I mean, we see the Broncos come out, at the beginning half of the season, their first initiative was to throw the ball deep downfield. Then they started opening up games where they started to hit short to intermediate, and then the deep ball starts to open up a little bit. You deal with receiver drops in the New England Patriots game, the Los Angeles Chargers game. But outside of that, Drew got better with his decision-making. He seemed like he looked a lot more comfortable, and I think that's just a plague of a young offense. Now, is it enough to say, look, you're the guy going into 2021? No, and I even think that Drew knows that. But I think the one thing, if I had to give any advice to Drew Lock, is stay off social media. I mean, I would tune out the noise, just put your head down, grind the work like you've done so far. Come into training camp, regardless if you're going to have competition or not, and just do what you think you can do. Put it all out there on the field, because at the end of the day, that's all Drew can do, and the organization is going to give him that chance to do that. But yeah, I think that any report out there that suggests that Drew Lock is not smart at the quarterback position, I think is very overplayed and is far from true.
You hit the nail on the head. Is it enough? Probably not. But, it is enough to, I think, buy him at least a training camp with, against another quarterback and go from there.
You've been crushing it. As always, we really appreciate the time tonight.
Appreciate you, gentlemen. Have a good one.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, the latest on Drew Lock. There are reports out there about the Broncos maybe being out on him. We'll get to it next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Let's get to this thing from Tony Pauline, because we talked about this on the Broncos Country Tonight TV show, and you can check that out on the Broncos YouTube right now. The Broncos are, quote-unquote, not sold on Drew Lock and, quote-unquote, down on Drew Lock.
Oh, no.
As he talked to people out at the Senior Bowl, and they had to dummy down the playbook late in the year just to help Drew Lock out.
That's not true, exactly. There are some things that are true in there, and we like Tony. Tony's a good dude. But that is not exactly true. Did the Broncos simplify the playbook? Yes, they did.
It was pretty obvious.
Did they do that because people weren't getting the verbiage intense aspects of the West Coast offense, and they wanted something that they could just get rep? They were eliminated from playoff contention. They wanted these guys to get good at the base install stuff. Yes, they did. Was it just Drew Lock? No, it wasn't. It's more players than just Drew Lock is the reason they simplified that. And it wasn't that they dummied it down. That verbiage bothers me. They just kind of pared it down. They cut down the number of plays and went with kind of some bread and butter base install stuff just to kind of get reps on that. They knew they were eliminated at that point, and they were just trying to get some good quality reps in games so they can come back next year and have something to build off of. And so, people try to spin that stuff as, Broncos are down on Drew Lock. If Broncos were down on Drew Lock, they would have made every effort to get Matt Stafford. They would have made a deal that would have gotten them Matt Stafford. Oh, by the way, the Lions wanted Drew Lock in that deal. So, this is it's absurd to me. You can tell who people are by their actions. And the Broncos didn't even have a top offer for Stafford, which tells you where they are, what they feel about this roster, what they feel about the competitive future of this team. They're not going to blow it up to go out and get somebody like that because they feel like they've got a competitive roster that's just a little bit away. And they do like the promise of Drew Lock. They wanted to keep Lock if they brought in Stafford because they felt like that Stafford could start for a season or two and then Lock could just take over when he developed behind him. That was the plan. Now, would they jettison Lock in a Deshaun Watson thing? Yes, they would. But that's a little bit different. Deshaun Watson's 25 years old.
I mean, that kind of comes back to the point that Ian Rappaport was making to Cody Roark, that it'd have to be, a recognizable difference.
Deshaun Watson would be a remarkable, recognizable, sizable. It's the same quote I got from a Broncos source. It's the exact same quote I got. It'd have to be something that is a difference maker.
Yes.
And it would have to be, in being a difference maker, it would have to be something that would blow up the core of this team. And I get it. I get the excitement, and I get the wanting to be in the conversation and all that. But, I just think people are setting themselves up for disappointment.
So, but you have this report. You have what Michael Lombardi said about how...
Which had no truth to it.
Right. Okay, fine. But I'm just saying you have two reports from two guys that are considered insiders that both said that the Broncos are out on Drew Lock. Where's this coming from?
I mean, it's people speculating basically based off of the fact that they feel the Broncos need a quarterback. I've seen this carousel before with other QB-needy teams in other years. They do the same thing. These reporters come out and they'll just kind of speculate based on, they're not happy with this guy. Well, of course they're not happy with Drew Lock's play last year. Nobody's happy with Drew Lock's play last year. Drew Lock isn't happy with Drew Lock's play last year. Duh. But, like, the weasel wording that people use to try to make it seem like something more than it is. And that's the part that bugs me. Like the Broncos are not satisfied with the level of play they had at the quarterback position last year. That doesn't mean they don't feel Drew can improve.
Yeah, that's an important distinction.
They are not 100% confident in Drew being the starter next year. They are confident in him coming in, having a camp battle, and seeing if he can be the guy they thought he could be when they drafted him. And so that's the thing. Like understanding those subtle differences is the difference. And you get every Yahoo fan out there that'll say this guy just stinks or whatever. And I mean Drew's one of the top 30 quarterbacks in the world. To say the guy's trash or he stinks is frankly ludicrous coming from a guy that's sitting on his couch right now that couldn't do a tenth of what he's doing.
I was having a conversation with another Broncos person this weekend, and it was echoed by many that at some level the speculation, there's sort of hope that the Broncos eventually commit to something and we can kind of get past a little bit of this, whether it's Drew Lock or they're committing to going after Deshaun Watson.
But media people love this. How many segments have we built around this just today?
I understand, but there's a certain amount of tearing at the fabric of the fan base that's kind of happening right now.
Okay. I get that.
And so, again, I feel as though you're right. I mean, in the offseason, this is one of the things that dominates sports talk radio. It's one of the things that dominates columns. But also there's a certain amount that you'd kind of hope for the fan base to bring them together. I don't know what brings them together right now. Like this is more divided than they ever were with Paxton Lynch and Trevor Siemian. Like that was always the should you play your first rounder no matter what kind of conversation versus playing the guy that the locker room preferred.
Right.
This is way different.
Right. And it is kind of it's beginning to boil over.
Coming up next on Broncos Country Tonight, we check in with Hall of Famer Steve Atwater. He broke down Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech. He'll tell us what he thinks next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Steve Atwater joining us here. Steve, let's talk about, I want to go straight to cornerbacks here because I had you take a look at Caleb Farley. And one of the things that I brought up to Ben on the show earlier was about how cornerbacks are a developmental position. So do you think Caleb Farley in year one could bring cornerback one production to this team?
You know what? I think it's possible. The only thing that concerns me is that he really only got, one good year in, right? And then this past year, he sat out because of the COVID. I really like the kid, though, man. I love his game. But, without him having a ton of film, he had a knee injury early on in his career. But the guy, he's physical. He's long. He's 6'2", almost 200 pounds. He can run. He gets in great position. He does all the things you want to do. But, man, you're talking about an early round pick, that, has set out a year, basically. Now, granted, I think with enough time, he'll get back to where he was. But, I think anybody who takes a year off, man, they got to knock some rust off before they are able to play at an elite level.
How does he compare to some of the other corners you've looked at? Does he look leaps and bounds ahead of some of the other corners that we've had you check in on?
Yeah, because he's not afraid to get up in guys' faces and run with them. And, again, he's in great position. He reminded me of Greedy Williams. We used to watch film on Greedy Williams, how he just got himself in between the quarterback and the receiver. And he's a lanky guy, so, it's difficult for quarterbacks to just perfectly fit those balls in there on him. And he finishes, man. He's finishing. He's not going to let you – if you got that ball in your hand and he's right there by, he's going to do everything he can to get that ball out before you go to the ground. And that's a great characteristic for a cornerback who – is trying to bat the ball down, going up against some of the best athletes on the team at the wide receiver position. So, I like him. He compares, he Surtain, they're probably the top two. Hopefully he'll come back and pick up where he left off. I'm not sure we're taking a year off.
When a guy takes a year off like that, how hard is it to get back into it, especially when you're that young, when you're a guy that needs those reps coming into the pro game? How difficult to transition is that going to be for him?
It all depends. He seems like he has a great work ethic. So, and I think he said he's going to take the year off and get ready for the NFL draft and they're not having the draft, but, just to prepare. So I would imagine, he's probably in tip-top shape right now, man. He's probably in better shape than he was, the last year that he played, which was the 2019 season. I like what I saw, man. I actually love what I saw. Him, again, finishing plays, being physical, not backing down from tackles. When he make a tackle, he tackles, stays on his feet. He tries to drive the guys back versus, just lunging out for guys and leaving his feet. He's a really solid player, man. He could be a superstar.
I think Caleb Farley has everything, the makings of being a good cornerback in this league. But if the Broncos are taking him at number 10, or in this case, number 9 in the top 10, then don't they have to have some other hedges there at corner? Because really that room right now looks pretty dang thin.
I would imagine, there are a lot of corners out there now, especially considering, last season, a lot of the young guys who would normally get an opportunity to prove themselves in training camp, they didn't get that opportunity last year. Teams were being more safe, trying to stick with veteran guys who have some experience. We got to find those diamonds in the rough, and we are going to need to add some more guys to the roster, though.
How much attention do the Broncos need to pay to the cornerback position this offseason in the draft and free agency?
Getting rid of A.J. Bouye, that was a big thing. And then, I would think Bryce Callahan is the starter right now and Mike Ojemudia on the other side of him. But, we still need a third corner. And I would imagine still is going to be Bryce Callahan moving into the slot. So we'll need an outside corner. Now, we have guys on the roster, but they've had injuries. Most of them have had injuries. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we had, added 2, 3, 4 corners, in some form or fashion, whether it be, rookie free agents, college free agents, or guys who, possibly didn't play in the league last year because, like I said, there were just a lack of opportunities.
So quarterbacks are in the news right now, obviously, for the Broncos. So, I basically am kind of looking to you here for a moment and just asking, like, for the Broncos, where it gets kind of a little bit dicey is thinking about how much you're going to have to give up. Now, last week 2 weeks ago, we did take the case to court, and you said that you didn't want to give up really anything to go get Deshaun Watson.
There was a rumor out there that he didn't want to come here, so that was a big part of it.
Okay, well, does that change?
If he's interested in coming here, he's legitimately interested in coming here, you got to explore it. But again, I don't want to give up the farm for anybody.
I think you look at this team, and the Broncos are closer to a defensive rebuild or at least reload than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. You know, Von Miller is in his age, Kareem Jackson in his age. They just got rid of A.J. Bouye. Alexander Johnson is an RFA. Will be coming up on a big deal, and he's 30 years old. Jarrell Casey, once he clears IR, is not going to be here. We're not sure if we're re-signing Shelby Harris or trying to re-sign Justin Simmons, but they're not sure on that. You start looking around this defense, and man, there's a bit of a reload that's needed.
Well, you know what? I mean, it seems like every year when guys are free agents, people, we all think that they're going to be these mass changes. And I found, over the last few years that, man, the majority of those guys end up being right back with the same team. And I'm hoping that, again, Mr. Payton can work his magic and be able to get a majority of those guys back. Man, I love to have Shelby Harris back. Love to have Justin Simmons, obviously. Love to have Von Miller. Like you say, I don't know, man. I don't know what the cap is like. Will we be able to afford all those guys? But if we could have a majority of the guys back last year and those guys are ready to go, man, that defense, we're looking good.
Steve, good to have you on the program as always, my friend.
All right, gents. Hey, man, great being on with you guys. Have a great one. Thank you.
For more Broncos Country Tonight, listen weeknights from 7 till 11 on KOA Radio AM 850 and 94.1 FM.